In this video, we are going to learn how to deploy a Springboot microservices into EKS cluster using Helm and Jenkins pipeline. So if you look at this diagram, we need to have EKS cluster configured. Okay, so this is a EKS cluster configured with 2 worker nodes. And then we also have ECR repo configured here as well in AWS cloud. Okay, and then this is our GitHub. Okay, so I have configured my Springboot application inside GitHub, and we are going to create a Jenkins pipeline. So I have configured my Jenkins over here. So we are going to create a Jenkins pipeline that is going to check out the code from GitHub. It is going to build a jar file using Maven. It is going to build the Docker image and then tag the Docker image and then push the Docker image into ECR. And then finally, using Helm chart, we are going to deploy the Docker image from ECR into EKS cluster. So it's a very simple use case. This use case is really based on real-time scenarios. We also have a similar type of deployment, CI/CD pipeline, in my current project as well, where I'm working. So this will be extremely useful for people, who is learning DevOps or who is already, into DevOps. But if you wanted to deploy your Springboot application inside Kubernetes cluster using Helm chart and Jenkins pipeline, so this is a great video for you. Awesome, guys. So let's get started. So if you look at the prerequisite, obviously we need to have EKS cluster configured, and we also need to have ECR repo as well. So we are going to set up EKS cluster using eksctl command. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. And then we need to have ECR repo for storing the Docker image. And then we need to have all these CLI commands or CLI tools installed. We need to have AWS CLI, we need to have Helm CLI, we need to have Kubectl, and then we also need to have eksctl as well. And then of course, we also need to have our Springboot application as well, right? So we have already configured that in GitHub. Okay, so how are you going to implement all of this thing, right? So we need to first create the EKS cluster using eksctl command. So I also have a separate video on how to set up EKS cluster using eksctl command as well. If you are interested, you can definitely watch that video. I will also post that link in the description as well. Okay, and then we also need to have ECR repo, okay, for storing the Docker image. And then we are going to create a namespace inside EKS cluster. This is where we are going to deploy our Springboot application inside the EKS cluster. Okay, so namespace is nothing but it's kind of a logical, a grouping. If you have several microservices, you can group them right under a namespace inside your Kubernetes cluster. And then we are going to create a Helm chart for our Springboot application. And then we are going to modify values, right? We are going to modify the Helm chart based on our Docker image values and whatnot, right? So that's what we are going to do inside the Helm chart. And then we are going to create a Jenkins pipeline with all the stages here, right? So that's going to build the jar file, build the Docker image, tag the Docker image, and then push the Docker image into ECR. And then finally, we are going to use a Helm command in order to deploy that Springboot application or Docker container from ECR into EKS cluster. Okay, and then most importantly, we are going to use dynamic Docker image tag. Okay, so we are also going to build the Docker image dynamically, and then we will also download the Docker image from ECR in a dynamic manner. And then we will pass that Docker image right during the deployment as well. Okay, so we are not going to use the latest tag. We are going to use the dynamic Docker image tag. Okay, once the Springboot application is deployed, and then we are going to verify the deployments in the namespace inside EKS cluster, and then finally we are going to access the application. Okay, so yeah, so these are the implementation steps. Yes, set up the cluster, create a namespace, and then create a Helm chart, make changes inside the Helm chart, and then create a config entry inside Jenkins, and then create a pipeline, and then verify the deployment. Okay, awesome. So let's get started. So I'm going to take you guys to my website, coachdevops.com. I will be posting the link right below the video as well. So if you see here, yes, we need to have EKS cluster configured. We also need to have Jenkins instance up and running. So I already have my Jenkins instance up and running. So this is my Jenkins instance. Okay, I have configured inside AWS cloud. Perfect. So this is my Jenkins. So if you see here, right, we also need to have AWS CLI install, Helm install and all. So I don't have anything. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and then start installing one by one. Okay, so let's start with setting up AWS CLI. So click on that link. So this is going to give you all the steps for you in order to configure AWS CLI. AWS CLI now. Perfect. So let's go ahead and then install Helm. Okay, so we need to install Helm. So yes, there are several ways you can install Helm, but I'm going to use the scripting approach. So I'm going to download the scripts. Okay, I'm going to change mod, and then let's install Helm. Okay, and then you can verify real quick whether Helm is installed or not. So we are going to use Helm 3. We are not using Helm version 2, we are using version 3. So just remember that. And then let's also go ahead and install kubectl as well. So kubectl is being installed. And you can also check the version, right? Perfect. So we took care of AWS CLI, we took care of Helm, we took care of installing kubectl. And then we also need to go ahead and then install eksctl as well. So eksctl is a command line utility for like performing any task related to EKS cluster. Okay, so let me go ahead and then install that as well. So it is installed, and this is a version. Okay, so I'm not worried so much about the version. That's totally fine. Very good, right? I think we took care of all the CLI installables. And the next thing is we also need to have Docker install as well. So I'm going to directly use this command. The reason why we have to install Docker is obviously, right? So if you look at this diagram, we need to build the Docker image. For that, you have to install Docker inside Jenkins. Very good. So Docker also installed. You can verify whether Docker is installed or not. Very good. Docker is also installed as well. Perfect. So make sure Jenkins have proper permission in order to perform Docker builds. That is really important. Okay. So we have to add Jenkins user to the Docker group. Okay. And then I'm going to restart Jenkins service. It's going to take a few seconds. And then let's reload, system daemon files. And then let's stop and restart Docker. And then you can also check the status as well real quick. There you go. Very good. So Docker is running. Perfect. So far so good. Okay. And then of course we also need to install, Docker plugin and Docker pipeline plugin. Most importantly, the Docker pipeline plugin. Search for Docker. And we are going to install Docker and then Docker pipeline plugin. Perfect. That's it. Let me go back to the instructions. We also need to have ECR repo created. Okay. I already have ECR repo created here. If you go to AWS console ECR, so creating ECR repo is not a big deal. You know what? Let me do one thing. Let me delete this one and then I will create a new repo. Okay, it's not a big deal. Okay, so go ahead and then create repo. So this is the repo I want to give. So make sure this is private. You don't want to make it public. So that's it, right? Click on create repo. So that's it. Our repo has been created. So this is where we are going to upload our Docker image from Jenkins pipeline. Perfect. And then of course, Docker file is already there. So if you look at my source code, we already have a Docker file. Perfect. Okay. And then the namespace needs to be created inside EKS cluster, but for that we need to create the cluster. Okay. So if you want to create the cluster, you can click on this particular link. So I have provided instruction here on how to create EKS cluster, but I'm going to leverage eksctl command in order to in order to create the cluster. It's pretty straightforward. So if you see here, we also need to have IAM role with administrator access. Okay, because we are going to access AWS services, especially the Kubernetes services like EKS service, right? So if you want to create a cluster, your EC2 instance needs to have proper permission. So let me see here. Okay, so let me go to EC2, the Jenkins EC2. Okay, let me see what is the IAM role this has. Okay, so I have this one, but I have already created IAM role. Okay, update. I will show you what is the policy that has. So if you go to EC2 instance, click on security, click on the IAM role, that will take you to your IAM, and then you can clearly see that what is the policy that IAM role has. Wonderful. So we need to have this policy attached. Very good. So far, so good. Okay. All right. So why don't we go ahead and then create the EKS cluster? So let me scroll down. So I'm going to change into Jenkins user here. Okay. And then we are going to create a EKS cluster with 2 worker nodes. Okay. So this is the command you see here, right? So eksctl create cluster. So this is going to be the cluster name. And then I want to create under US East 1 region. And then this is the managed group name. And then I want to create with 2 worker nodes. And then this is a sizing for the worker node. Okay. All right. Let's copy that command. Go ahead and then execute it. So believe it or not, this will easily take 12 to 18 minutes or even slightly longer. So what we are going to do, so while we are waiting for the cluster creation is happening, so why don't we go ahead and then start looking into other things, right? Meaning, so if you look at this diagram, yes, the cluster creation is happening in the background. But what we can do though, we can still go ahead and then create a Jenkins pipeline. And then, that can do some of the work as well, right? And then we will also create a Helm chart as well, right? So why don't we, go with that, right? Why don't we get started on that? Okay. So let me go back to the instruction here. Let's see here, right? So if you see here, we need to have Helm chart created. Okay. So I have already downloaded, or I have already configured my Visual Studio Code in my local machine. If you see here, so let me perform git pull. So this is my code. Okay. So this is my code. You can actually see here. So this is my, remote repo, right? So that is actually nothing but over here, right? So this is my repo. So this is a Springboot application, which we are going to, Dockerize and then build the Docker image. And then, this is what we are going to use, right? In order to deploy into EKS cluster. So we are going to use Helm chart. So we need to first create the Helm chart. Okay. So Helm is nothing but it's a package manager for Kubernetes. Using Helm, you can easily manage all your microservices deployment inside Kubernetes cluster. Why? Because, when you're dealing with several microservices, you may have to, you may have to create a lot of Kubernetes resources, right? You have to, prepare for the deployment, services, secrets, service accounts and whatnot, right? So when you are leveraging Helm, you can easily manage the deployment of, all your Kubernetes objects. How do you manage all those resources using Helm? You need to create something called Helm chart. Okay. So how do you create a Helm chart? So this is a command. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into my machine where I have already downloaded. So in my machine also I have installed Helm. You see here, I have already installed Helm in my local machine as well. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to first create the Helm chart. Okay. So how do you create a Helm chart? It's very simple. Just say Helm create and then just give a name for the chart. You can give any name, but I want to give my chart. There you go. You see here, right? So now it has already created a chart folder here. Do you all see here? And then if you want to see what is inside the chart, you can use the tree command. There you go. You see here, right? So this has created Helm chart with all these files. Okay. So that's the great thing about Helm, right? It is going to create all this template for you. All you have to do is, configure these files. That's all we have to do. Okay. So now there are few files, we have to modify. So let me open up values.yaml file. So if you see here, okay, if you see here, this is where the image is mentioned, right? So this is nothing but from where, we are going to download our image. Okay. So since we are going to upload our image inside ECR, So we have to provide that image path. Okay. So what I'm going to do, let me go inside my ECR. So this is my ECR repo. So if you see here, this is the URI. So copy that URI and I'm going to replace that over here. You see here, right? And then I'm not going to use any tagging since we are going to build the tag dynamically, and we are also going to download the Docker image from here from ECR dynamically. We are not going to provide any tag. We are going to override this from the Jenkins pipeline. So just leave it like that and then scroll down, and we are going to use load balancer. So I'm going to type service type as a load balancer. Perfect. So that's pretty much over there. Very good. So let's save this. And then let's also go to the templates folder and look for deployment.yaml file. So everything, let's see if everything is good. Let's see here. Since ours is Springboot, right? So you need to change the container port to 8080. So make sure you change that also. Perfect. So let me save this. Perfect, right? So these two files needs to be modified. So we took care of that. Okay. Since I have created the Helm chart locally, so what I have to do, I need to, add, commit, and then push into GitHub. But before that, let me make sure I took care of everything here. So this is my instructions here. I think we took care of everything as per, instruction provided in my website. Very good. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and then perform git status now. Okay, so we have created this chart folder. Let me go ahead and then add it. And then I'm going to say git commit -m. I'm going to say created my chart for my Springboot app. Okay, and then let's go ahead and then perform git push. Very good. So if I go inside my GitHub, click on refresh. There you go, guys. Do you all see here? So this is our Helm charts, right? So Helm chart with all the templates and everything. Very good. And then of course, if you want to verify your changes, there you go. You see here. So this is from here, it is going to download the Docker image, right? From ECR. So that's the reference here. Okay, perfect. All right. So what is the next thing? So we took care of that. Now let's go inside Jenkins. Let's make sure we have all this thing configured, right? Since this is a Springboot, which is a Java based, so we have to first ensure that we have everything, especially like, we are going to use Maven. We have to make sure that, Maven is configured here. There you go. You see here. So I have already created this entry here. Okay. So we are going to use Maven 3. Very good. Let me go back to the instruction here. And then yes, we also need to create this entry as well, but don't worry, we will do that later because currently the EKS cluster creation is still happening in the background. There you go. Still it is going on. So what I can do though is let me move forward here, right? So at least what we can do, we can still go ahead and then, create a Jenkins pipeline. So at least what we can do, we can check out the code, build the jar file, build the Docker image, and then we can at least do until here. We can also push the Docker image into ECR as well, right? So why don't we go ahead and then at least get started on that. So let me go to my dashboard, Jenkins dashboard. So click on new item. So I want to create a pipeline. So I want to create my Helm, deployment. I'm going to say my Helm Kubernetes deployment job. Okay. So that is the, pipeline job I'm going to create. Click on pipeline, say okay. Okay, so pipeline got created. Now we can go ahead and then configure. So let me select this option called hello world. So this is going to give us the basic template. So I want to first check out the code. Okay, so we need to have a pipeline code to check out. So click on pipeline syntax. So click on checkout from version control. Okay, so repo URL. So this is actually a public repo. Okay, so feel free to fork my repository and then make changes. Okay, so I'm going to check out from here. Since this is a public repo, you don't have to provide any credentials. What is the branch name? The branch name is master. So let me, it's already have it. Click on generate pipeline script. There you go. So this is the code for checking out code from there. Perfect. Apply, save. Let me just make sure everything is working. At least that particular stage is working before we move forward. There you go. Very good. So we were able to check out the code from GitHub. Let's move on to the next stage. So since this is the Springboot, right? So if you look at the Docker file, you need to have, if you see here, right, we need to have this Springboot jar file being created. Okay, and then of course using that, we are bringing up the application, isn't it? We are copying the Springboot app inside the container, and then we are bringing up using this command. Okay, so we need to create this jar file. So if you look at the pom.xml file, we have all the entries over there, right? So if I scroll down, so if you look for the final name, so that is going to be the name of the jar file. Okay, and then if you also see here the packaging type. Okay, so that's the pom.xml file. Okay, perfect. So let's get started here, right? So let's go ahead and create a next stage now. So we are going to create a next stage called build jar file, steps block. Okay, so now we need to use maven. So I'm going to, since we have already mentioned that, you're gonna go ahead and then say maven clean install. That's it. Apply, save. So that should take care of building that jar file. Let's see. So the jar file has been successfully built. We could see that here as well. If you go all the way down, you'll be able to see that. There you go. The jar file has been created. Very good. So why don't we go ahead and create the Docker image as well. So let me add the next stage here. I'm going to say build image, steps block, and we are going to have script block as well. Okay, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a environment block here, and then I'm going to declare a variable called registry, because this is where we are going to upload our Docker image. That is actually nothing but ECR entry. So go to ECR, copy this, and then paste it here. Okay, and then here I'm going to say docker.build registry, right? Okay. So what I wanted to do as well, we also need to tag the Docker image as well. So so it's better to store that in a variable, right? So let's do this. Let's do like this: Docker image equal to this. Okay, and then we will use like that. Okay, so we will just tag the Docker image. So this is the build number. This is actually nothing but Jenkins predefined variable. Okay, so it's gonna have it's gonna tag with the build number. Okay, let's click on build now. So it is in the process of building the Docker image, and then you will also see tagging the Docker image as well. Very good. There you go. You see here. So we were able to successfully tag the Docker image with the build number, which is our build number is 3. So this was able to tag it. Wonderful. Very good. So the next step would be go ahead and then upload the Docker image into ECR. So I'm going to write the next stage. So I'm going to say push image, steps block and script block. So we are going to push the Docker image inside ECR. So let's go to ECR. Okay, so this is the repo. Click on it and click on view push commands. There you go, guys. You see here? So we can leverage this command, right? So we are going to use AWS CLI. So if you remember, we have already installed AWS CLI inside Jenkins. So that's the reason why you need to install AWS CLI. So I'm going to use this particular command for authenticating. Okay, so this is going to help you to authenticate inside your ECR, and then I'm going to perform the Docker push command because we have already built it. We have already tagged the Docker image. All we have to do is push the Docker image. Okay, so what I'm going to do, so you can also copy this command as well. It's one and the same. So let me copy that. There you go. You see here. And then what is account ID? This is my account ID. That's my account ID. Okay, that's it, right? So whatever we have tagged it, that image will be pushed it here, right? I mean, using this command, that image will be pushed inside ECR. Okay, so why don't we verify this, right? I think everything is good. Let me make sure. Okay, good. Apply save. Click on build now. So far, so good. Very good, right? And of course, we can confirm that right now. Click on refresh here. Wow, look at here, guys. So this is the image tag. See, I'm not using latest tag. Using latest tag is not recommended. You always want to build your Docker image dynamically using your image tag, right? So make sure you do it. There are many ways you can build your Docker image dynamically, but I'm using build number here. Wonderful. All right, so far so good. All we have to do is doing this Helm deployment, but for that we need to have our EKS cluster configured. Wow, see here, guys, it's done. Cluster creation is done. Perfect. So why don't we go ahead and then query the cluster? So kubectl get nodes. When you do that, there you go, guys. So we have got 2 worker nodes. So that is nothing but you can see that over here. Go inside EC2 console. There you go, guys. Look at that. So that's our worker nodes, right? Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. So we were able to create that. And then if you look for pods, obviously we don't have anything deployed. So nothing is there, right? So now what we have to do, we need to first create the namespace, correct? We need to create the namespace. So let's go ahead and then create the namespace. Okay. And this is the namespace I want to give, Helm-deployment. Again, you can give any name. There you go. So namespace got created. And then if you want to know the namespace, the list of namespaces, there you go. So we were able to see all the namespaces. So this is the namespace where we are going to deploy our Springboot application. Wonderful. Very good. So far so good. We created the namespace as well. So everything is good. All we have to do is go to pipeline and then use Helm command in order to do the deployment. All right, so before I do, let me go back to here. Let's try to perform some Helm command. So you can use this command Helm list. So what this will do is this will list all the, releases in the default namespace. But if you remember, we have created a namespace called Helm deployment. Okay. So when you do that, obviously we didn't install anything. So you don't see anything, right? We have not done anything here, so you don't see anything. So that's totally fine. Okay, but how are we going to do it? Okay, so if you look at this command, we are going to perform Helm command. Okay, so we are going to use Helm upgrade. Okay, so this is actually nothing but the release name, and we are going to use this install command. And then here we have to mention our chart folder, right? So if you remember, we have already committed all the chart information, all the chart entry, everything we have committed here, right? Okay, so all the chart information, everything is under my chart folder. Okay, and then this is the namespace. So remember, we have created a namespace, and then most importantly, we want to pass this image tag, right? So this is the image tag. So what Helm is going to do, it is smart enough to know that, okay, so you want to install this Helm chart. Since we are passing that image tag dynamically, this will be overridden here, right? Okay, and then it will go ahead and then download the Docker image from ECR dynamically, and then it will go ahead and then deploy it. Okay, very good. So why don't we do that, right? So let me copy this particular command. Let me go to the pipeline first. Let me go here, configure. Let me first create that stage. We need to write code for creating the stage. Okay, so I'm going to say stage. I'm going to say Helm deploy. Okay, steps. Okay, we also need to have a script block as well. And then we are going to use this command. Okay, I can copy this and then we can customize it. That's not a big deal. So let's do that. Okay, so like I explained, so we are using, Helm upgrade command. Okay, and this is the release name. Okay, and install command, and then we want to install our chart. So this is actually nothing but your chart folder name. Okay, so if you have some other name, you can give that over here, over there. That's not a problem. And then this is most important. That's the name of your namespace. And then this is your Docker image. So that's it, right? So click on apply, save, go ahead and click on build now. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Wow, see here guys, it says that, release does not exist, installing it now. And then this was able to deploy. Wow. Okay, so how do you verify, this was able to deploy? So like I said, we are going to use Helm list command. There you go, guys. You see here, let me expand this a little bit. There you go. You see here, so this is the release name, and this is the revision 1, and then this is the date, obviously, and this is the namespace. Okay, so that's our deployment, right? And status is very important. It says that deployed, and then this is our chart, whatever the chart name, right? Wonderful. And then how do you see all the pods and everything? So what we are going to do, we are going to obviously use get pods, right? And then use the namespace -m Helm deployment. Okay. Wow, there you go, guys. You see here? So that's our pod, isn't it? And then the way we are exposing is using service. So let me go ahead and then get the service as well. Wow, you see here, guys? So this is our service name. And then of course we are exposing through load balancer URL. And then if you want to see the pod logs, right? Let's also go to pod. Okay, let me say kubectl describe pod, and then this is the pod name, and then this is our namespace name. There you go. You see here, it say the successfully assigned, created, and whatnot, right? So everything is running, right? So everything is running right now. Wonderful. So let me go back to service. So this is my load balancer URL. So just copy that. All you have to do is go to the browser, try to access it. It's going to take few seconds. Wow, look at here, folks. So this is the output what we are expecting, right? Look at that. Okay. So if you want to make a code change, right? So what you can do, you can go inside Springboot application. Let's say I want to make some code change. So I'm gonna, modify in here, right? Here I'm gonna say instead of hello, let's say I want to say howdy. The real-time scenarios. Okay, perfect. So why don't I, commit this? I want to say triggering build in Jenkins. If you want to configure webhooks, feel free to do that, but I'm going to manually run the Jenkins pipeline. This is just for demo. So what I was talking is, if you want to configure webhooks, you can go here, right? You can trigger through webhooks and whatnot. That's not a problem. There you go. Let's see. So I made the code change. Wonderful. So look at that, revision 2, right? So if I go back here, if I say, there you go. So we see revision 2. Okay, so it's deployed. Okay, very good. So if you want to see the pods, there you go. See, 19 seconds, right? So since we build the Docker image dynamically, it was able to detect the code change, and then it was able to push the code change, right? It has created a new pod. Very good. And then if I want to see the output, just go ahead and then refresh it. Wow, look at here, folks. We are able to see our code change. Awesome, right? So that's how you can deploy your Springboot application inside Kubernetes cluster using Helm and Jenkins pipeline. So before I let you all go, last but not the least, so it is also very important that you need to clean up your EKS cluster. Okay, so don't forget it. If you leave them running, you will be really charged. So perform this particular command in order to clean up all the resources you have created under EKS cluster. So this is the command, okay? So eksctl delete cluster, perform this command. So of course, this is going to take maybe 3 to 5 minutes in order to gracefully delete the EKS cluster. So that's a good practice. All right, so yeah, so let it run. That's how you create a CI/CD pipeline in order to deploy your Springboot microservices inside EKS cluster using Helm and Jenkins pipeline. Thank you for watching this video.